Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of Neurodivulgence. I am DeAnna Nava, co-founder of Joyfully Different. We're a community for neurodivergent entrepreneurs, and I'm a therapist and coach supporting neurodivergent people in their unmasking journey. I am joined today by the amazing, magical Sophie Longley, and we are going to unpack something that's been hitting the neurodivergent community hard in the last couple of weeks. So before we dive into that, Sophie, would you like to introduce your amazing self to our listeners?
Well, thank you for the great introduction already. I'm Sophie. I am a coaching psychology practitioner, and I'm also an autism researcher, where I've researched the late diagnostic experiences of autistic women. And I work primarily with autistic adults who are diagnosed later in life to try and make sense of their identity and their post-diagnostic becoming.
Post-diagnostic becoming, that's such a beautiful turn of phrase.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, you sound so serene when we're talking just now, and I know that we're both going to get angry as we're unpacking
Oh,
this.
yes.
This is the calm before the storm.
It's the warm-up.
So, what inspired us to do this episode today is that there's been an article doing the rounds written by Uta Frith, who's an autism researcher, and I don't even know where to begin with it. It is just so. I was going to use the word problematic, but I'm really going to try and talk with nuance today because I don't want to use big chunky labels. Because one of the things that I see in the neurodivergent community is groupthink. So we all hop on an opinion, and there has been lots of people hopping on bashing Uta Frith, bashing Naomi Fisher, who recently interviewed her. And so I don't want this to be having the easy discussion of repeating what everyone else is repeating. I want to kind of factually go through it as two autistic women in the field who work with other autistic people. Like, what's the reality of it? Just to provide some sort of counterpoint. So I guess if we can kind of, navigate it with some nuance, which is going to be hard because, to be honest, it does make me really angry. So.
It does. It makes me angry. And like the added layer for me is that I am one of these autism researchers. And obviously I'm autistic myself. And it carries a lot of weight with me because I work with people who are autism researchers as well. And in that community where there is still a bit of hesitance to, introduce autistic researchers into the field and have us input into the science of it. So it's like I'm straddling both worlds, being an autistic person and also an autism researcher. So I think, let's kind of explore the nuance of it because it is a huge topic to unpack.
Yeah, and can you say a little bit more about that actually? As an autism researcher who is autistic, are you treated differently than, like, say, the Simon Baron Cohens and the neurotypical people who are like.
I mean, I'm no Simon Baron Cohen, but we are. And there's research out there by Monique Botha, who is an amazing autism researcher, about what we go through in the field. And we're not taken seriously. And I think it's changing. There are lots of us emerging and doing amazing research in this field, but there are still these prominent, not autism researchers out there who think that we are too subjective to conduct objective scientific autism research. And we put our own experiences onto these participants, and we're not scientists and we need to view the facts. And my argument is that, do we need objectivity? And what can our lived experience bring to autism research? And there's findings out there that say we bring a hell of a lot. And they often ignore that people who are not autistic doing autism research, they can be biased and objective too. And that is the thing that we have to grapple as autism researchers with lived experience, trying to tread carefully in academia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that makes my blood boil, just the idea that a researcher would be dismissed because of their lived experience, because everyone has a perspective, has lived experiences, has biases. So there's no one that's immune from that.
Exactly. That's what we argue. And there's research out there, especially research that's to do with phenomenology, which is all about focusing on the lived experience, not just of the researcher, but of the participants. And that is hugely dismissed in some of the more kind of neuroscience-y traditional experimental research field of autism, which I think Frith might be a part of.
So let's dive into the article. We won't read the whole thing, but we'll put it in the show notes. But the headline is, the article's called Uta Frith, Why I No Longer Think Autism is a Spectrum. And then, this was recorded in TES magazine, and it says the autism spectrum has widened to the point of collapse, affecting how teachers should support autistic pupils in the classroom. She actually goes so much wider than pupils. She basically goes full on and dismisses the experiences of autistic women, anyone who's late diagnosed autistic. So from she defines late diagnosed as you're diagnosed after the age of 5. So there's a very narrow window of what's considered genuine autism, according to Uta Frith.
It's interesting that she leads with children straight away, and that is her research studying autistic children. And I feel like to have a strong opinion on this, to come out and say there's no spectrum, I feel like you would need to be an autism researcher in the field that has researched the whole spectrum. And she hasn't. She's focused on kids. And I just want to bring that out here. I feel like if you're going to bring this huge revelation, you need to have worked with all types of autistic people, not just autistic children and their parents.
So is that her specialism? She specializes in autistic children, and she hasn't actually been researching adults anyways?
No.
That's a fucking flaw.
I don't know too much about her, but her field is cognitive science, and most of her research has been with children and their parents and studying the behavior of children in experimental tasks. And that is one side of autism research, but there's a hell of a lot more out there. But that is where she sits.
Yeah, that's interesting context. And of course, she's been a researcher for something like 50 plus years.
Yes.
So she's seen a lot in that time, but I guess it's been from a narrow lens, because the longitude of the time doesn't mean that she's studied the breadth of the autistic experience.
And when you look back at her papers, I've had a look through, as I do chronologically, looking at what she's done, and she hasn't actually produced any research recently. Like, it is, like you said, it's very narrow. It might be for a long time, but it's on a narrow set of people, and it makes us question whether that is the authoritative voice now that we have to listen to. I don't really think so.
Yeah. And I encourage anyone who's interested in this to listen to the interview that she did with Naomi Fisher, because it was interesting. I listened to it, I guess, just to get my blood pressure up. And it was positioned as, Dr. Naomi Fisher positioned it as, look, there's some more nuance to the Uta Frith article. You should listen to this podcast, which was recorded before the article came out. And I thought, okay, you know what? I'll give it a shot. Like, genuinely, I want to hear different points of view. Let's hear it. And I will say the podcast was, to me, like 10 times more problematic than the actual article. So yeah, it did provide nuance, the wrong kind. Oh my gosh. In the podcast, which is basically just a fleshed out version of the article, Uta Frith is arguing that we should focus on deficit and impairment in autism, and that she thinks that the anti-destigmatization has been harmful, that it should be more stigmatized. And that people are wanting it because it's not stigmatized, and therefore we should stigmatize it again.
Who's wanting it, though? That's my question. There are a lot of stakeholders, as they call it, in the autism world. We have clinicians, parents, autistic people ourselves, people profiting from autism research, universities. Who is asking these questions, and who is wanting this subtype, and who is wanting the deficit model to be brought back?
Yeah, I think that the people wanting the deficit model to be brought back are the people who want it to be narrower, to want to have less people under this label. So the motive is, let's have less autistic people. Why do they want less autistic people?
Yeah. Why? And we work with autistic people every single day, don't we? And I've been researching with them since 2021, and no one said to me, hey, actually, I really want to I really want a subtype. I want to be categorized more. I really want more barriers in the way for me to getting post-diagnostic support and getting a diagnosis. No one said that. So yeah.
Yeah. I think let's start there then, just in terms of, because I feel one of the premises of the article is that people are seeking diagnosis because it's become like this trendy thing. And she particularly does throw women under the bus. So late diagnosed women. And
It's
so
really
she makes some claims that autism is a gendered thing, the gendered basis of autism. There are just diseases that are more common in males and diseases that are more common in females. So where to start with that language? I mean, it's not a disease.
Whoa, who said disease? I'm not in this part of research where I'm studying the genetics of autism, so I might be incorrect, but there isn't a sex-aligned gene for autism. It's our experiences, isn't it? It's our gender, it's how gender's constructed, it's how we move through the world. It's that part. And I think she's missing that bit. What do you think?
I think because she's so fixated on the children who get diagnosed early, and that to her is the valid type of autism, the fact that we have been diagnosed late invalidates us. And it's a chicken and egg thing. Have we been diagnosed late because the definition has been so narrow that it's excluded how autistic women present? And I mean, I think that our own lived experience is important. So I will share like a little bit of mine here in terms of how it has helped me to be diagnosed as autistic. Because I think the thing is, like, for me, diagnosis in itself, I mean, that's a whole other podcast. What's a diagnosis? Is it a real thing? What does it mean? To me, they are descriptive labels of human phenomena. The labels can shift and change to encompass various things. We're always kind of redefining that. So it's not a precise thing, like saying someone's 5'2".
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But those descriptive labels can still be massively useful in terms of determining what is going to be the treatment protocol for that particular kind of difficulty, or, you know, whatever. And so for me, having been categorized, again, with imperfect labels, because everything in the DSM, none of it is like, has a fucking biomarker, or maybe, you know, like, so again, that's to go off on a bit of a tangent, but it's all imperfect. I have been given a lot of labels before coming to this point. Like, just literally, it's probably going to take more than two hands. Like, you know, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, social anxiety, like OCD, anorexia, you know, borderline personality disorder. All of these things, if those labels had actually been accurate for me, then the supposed treatment for those things would have eased the causes of my distress. And then I wouldn't have been suffering so much. And then I wouldn't have been in and out of the mental health system. But for some reason, I was in and out of the mental health system from the age of 15, including being sectioned, including like having to be expelled from high school because I had missed so much because of my mental health. There was something going on there. And Uta Frith is saying that women should maybe be given more like different labels. We should be given chronic fatigue or social anxiety. I was given social anxiety. The social anxiety label did not help me because my issue is not social anxiety. When I finally came to be diagnosed as autistic, you know, 3 years ago, my mental health has massively improved because then I understood what the sensory differences, what a difference that makes to my well-being and my nervous system. What kind of communication feels safe to me? What kind of relationships feel safe to me to build? So I feel like the idea of a mental illness is putting the cause of the distress within the person. Whereas to me, I believe firmly in what Dr. Luke Beard and another autistic researcher says, which is autistic plus environment equals outcome. So for me, once you realize that you're autistic and you can design the environment that suits your neurotype, then you're going to have a better outcome. So like the proof is in the pudding. It helped because learning about autism, learning about what helps autistic people has massively improved the quality of my life for someone who is chronically mentally ill for decades. So that's the power of getting the right label.
Yeah. He said that so beautifully. But yeah, thank you for sharing. And you're right. We're not saying let's get rid of diagnostic labels completely, because that would be the other end of the spectrum. No, nobody gets diagnosed. We can all just self-define as we want. It's a middle ground. We need an accurate diagnosis, but accuracy doesn't mean trying to eliminate anyone who could receive a diagnosis. It means expanding it, but with greater accuracy, I think.
And I think it's a kind of narrow version of accuracy that's dismissing the lived experience, which you can't do, because this is a huge difference between diagnosing children and diagnosing adults. Children can't self-diagnose themselves. They can't scroll in the internet and like do a quiz or read the DSM and see, oh, I think I have that. Whereas as an adult, if you've been like passed from pillar to post and not gotten the help you need, you have to self-diagnose because you go, I think this is what I need. And there's a tremendous amount of self-advocacy involved. Without that, no one else is going to diagnose you because you're like, you're an adult. So
Yep.
it's nonsensical to dismiss people who have sought the diagnosis, because how the bloody hell else are we going to do it? No one else is like, your mom's not going to come and diagnose you at the age of 38.
And it's this thing of we need to self-advocate for ourselves and research it. A lot of us late diagnosed women, we have researched it before we've then sought out a diagnosis because we will be disbelieved. So of course we know a lot about it before we then seek out a diagnosis. But on the flip side of that, they say, well, if you're okay to self-advocate, then you probably don't have autism, because autism is a deficit in communication and self-reflection and theory of mind. And it's like, we can't win. Like what do you want us to do? Just sit there and not advocate? If we have the self-knowledge and we're able to communicate that in a way, then that's what we can do.
I feel like this links to Uta's kind of central claim around masking, right? Because if we are able to, I guess the ability to self-advocate, not necessarily linked to masking, but it could be somewhat in that we're having to learn to cross that bridge to communicate to a different neurotype. So we're continually having to learn how to speak the other person's language to be heard. So masking is a central part of self-advocacy, learning to mask, I think. And it's really rough. I mean, it's rough having to mask. It's rough if you can't mask. Neither is brilliant. But basically, the idea that if you are able to mask, then you're not autistic. Let's unpack that. Because to me, masking is one of the most detrimental parts of being autistic for me. And sometimes I look at, people that I know who are, I guess, I don't know how to say this correctly, so please do, from your knowledge, correct me if I say this wrong. But sometimes people are more visibly autistic because they have less capacity to mask. And I look at them and I think, you make complete sense to me. Everything that you are doing in an unfiltered way is how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. And I get that for people like that, it is hard because everything's on the surface, right? So you're being judged on the surface of that. And there's so many barriers involved with that. Whereas for myself, it just developed into this huge disconnect with who actually am I, because I was forced to become this chameleon from such an early age in order to not be punished and expelled from the tribe. It was just a visceral survival need, but also this disconnection. It had to sever that connection with myself. And I literally did not know who the fuck I was, because I was a different person with every single person. And it caused huge amounts of distress, exhaustion, mental health issues.
Yeah. It's a survival technique. There's a researcher, I think, called Wen Lawson, who's labeled it as adaptive morphing for trauma. It's a trauma response, right? And I think some people see those of us who are very capable of masking. At times, it fluctuates for me as well. It's not a fixed thing whether you're good at masking or not. But people see it as a privilege and, oh, well, you're not as autistic or as worthy of a diagnosis or support because you got to where you are through masking, and it's not come at a cost. And they don't see the actual cost, right? Like you said, the identity crisis, the mental health problems we've had, the loss of friendships, loss of jobs. These scientists or people who want to study masking just want to find out the biomarker for it, the sign. Can you mask or not? Very literal. They're not seeing the whole experience.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's also sometimes dismissed because masking is like this. I mean, because everyone does mask, right? Everyone masks. Say you're going in the office and you put on different clothes. That's a form of masking. Because maybe in your unfiltered raw self, you'd be in your sweatpants and an old t-shirt or something. So we're all masking. But the issue is, how much of a weight are you having to lift in that masking? Is your proximity to neuronormativity, are you so far within the circle that your masking is within that circle? Whereas if your norm is all the way out here on the periphery, in order to mask, you're having to cross this gigantic bridge and make all of that effort. The effort of masking is different the more that you diverge from the supposed norm, which is socially enforced.
I love that metaphor. It is literally like walking across a huge huge bridge, and then trying to get our resources back after we've done the masking or whatever you want to say, the impact for us, it can last for months. And it's happening all the time. And when people talk about masking in quite a shallow way, it's like, oh, well, you just do a bit of small talk and smile and that's it. That's masking. That's autistic masking. It really isn't. It goes so deep, doesn't it? Where we literally just don't know who we are and have to switch up our talking styles and our body language and our opinions all of the time.
And then also just the fundamental dissatisfaction that masking creates, because even if you're really good at masking, if that's far from who you genuinely are and you don't know who you genuinely are, then all of the connections, the opportunities, the jobs, whatever that you've created to fit your mask is not going to fit you. So you've created a life that could look successful on the outside of it and is massively not in alignment. And that's so painful. I mean, I definitely lived that because I was like the masking pro. I came here to the UK when I was 19 and I had had all these mental health issues, been sectioned, etc. So I was like, okay, game on, new life, new country, let's be a functional adult. And so it was like in an office just pretending to be this other person. And I got all these promotions and I had a big fancy job. And it was like, I was so terrified that if people actually knew me, that I wasn't going to belong. So I had like this two selves that I was navigating basically. And so it's like the success wasn't real success because it wasn't aligned with, I wasn't being true to myself in that.
And on the outside, people see functioning, and that's where the high functioning label comes from. Oh, externally. But masking, for me anyway, is such an internal thing. A lot of it is happening internally as well. Our opinions and how we feel and suppressing emotions and stuff, it is very internal. And I think that's probably going back to Frith is what she's struggling to understand, that it's an internal thing that maybe cannot be measured in the scientific way that she wants it to be measured, i.e. with some kind of observable biomarker experimental thing. A lot of it is internally. And what happens if we can't measure it?
Well, that's the thing. You can't, because as you said, it's an internal thing. But as Uta Frith is arguing, she keeps saying we need to return to hard research, by which she means quantitative research, observer research. And for something that is an internal phenomena, we can't dismiss qualitative research. We cannot dismiss lived experience. That is the research.
Yes. I'm a bit biased here because that is my field of research, qualitative research. And I use IPA, which is interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is all about focusing on the lived experience of the researcher and the participants. And that is empirical research. That is scientific. It's peer reviewed, but it's dismissed because there's no cause. There's no correlations being dragged out. There are no hard scientific facts. Still scientific. We are examining the internal experiences of autistic people. That is the research, but some people don't believe it and they just want observable behaviors. And that's where autism started off as in the 1940s, observable behaviors tested, retested. That's where ABA came from. Observing behaviors, changing behaviors, having a scientist or a psychologist observe and then tick something off on a checklist. The reality is not like that if a lot of the things that we experience is internal inside of us.
Yeah. And actually, I feel like ABA just proves the point that masking works, because ABA is a way of making people mask, right? And some of us didn't need ABA. We had environments that were so harmful, they ABA'd us involuntarily.
It's so true.
So we're successful ABA cases and we're fucking traumatized and like ready to come out the other side.
We ABA'd ourselves. Yeah, we're essentially behavioral psychologists, aren't we? Yeah, we did. And we know a lot of the trauma it causes autistic children who are forced into that and forced into masking. But research has gone a long way. I think psychologists are being a lot more open-minded, but there are a few, especially in the cognitive psychology camp, that still see where are the behaviors, what are the commonalities, What are the associations we can make? And it is incredibly difficult when autism is so heterogeneous, it's so broad.
It is broad. It's not a narrow type. If you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. We vary widely, and yet there are commonalities. So, like, let's unpick that, because again, I think Uta Frith makes claims that this is what she says: people still hang on to the idea that there's something that unites all the people who are diagnosed as autistic. I don't believe that anymore. What does unite us?
Trauma. From that quote, it sounds like she's looking for a trait that ignites us, like an inherent trait. But I think what unites us is experience. The way how she's putting it, she can't seem to see a trait. I mean, there are loads. I think there are loads of commonalities between all of us.
I love just the simplicity of that we get each other, right? So I know that for me, and this has been proven, that, the communication differences or difficulties that autistic people experience are not there to the same extent with other autistic people. So it's a cross neurotype problem. And so when we are able to communicate with others who communicate in the same way, experience the world in a similar way, then the difficulties we experience aren't there, because the difficulties aren't in us. They are in how we rub up against social norms, environmental norms, so it's the friction between our way of being and the other world. And when we're with others who share that way of being, the friction isn't there. That in itself is a kind of proof.
If you get a group of autistic people all, together, that there are going to be something that is common between us, whether it's us finding that the environment is a lot safer and a lot more comfortable for us, even though we may communicate differently. And I'm also talking about autistic non-speaking people. But there will be something. The way that she is wording it sounds like, oh, there isn't any common thread anymore. It's got too broad, where the only commonality we have is a diagnostic label, which, I disagree with.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess going back to the DSM and the ICD, the way that they diagnose autism, there's 3 main things that they look at. And one is like the social communication and interaction differences. And then the repetitive restrictive behaviors, and then the sensory issues. I think that they tend to look like, so those are the commonalities, but they can present in a number of different ways. The social communication issues could look like someone clamming up or being quiet in social situations, and you might not notice that there's anything going on for them, because they might just really fall into the background and be a bit shy. Or for other people, it might be that they just say whatever they're thinking unfiltered, and it causes massive issues because, as a tendency, we don't lie as much as holistic people. And so these are the commonalities, but there's a diversity in those domains in terms of what types of, again, repetitive restrictive behaviors. I fucking love a routine. My dream when I was younger was to open my closet. I remember there was this TV show that I watched, Doug. This is from the 90s.
Oh God, I remember Doug.
I love Doug so much. And do you remember his beatnik sister? What was she, Judy or something? I loved her. But I remember Doug opened his cartoon closet and he had 10 of the same outfit, t-shirt and trousers, all. And I was like, that's the dream. And I've just always wanted to be like that. Just, you don't have to think about it. And just the same thing, with foods, I'll go for months on end where I have the same breakfast, the same lunch. And so, yeah, sure, it's repetitive restrictive. To me, it's quite zen, So there's other ways in which that plays out. And of course, sometimes that can cause distress. So a lot of, I think research has found that something like 24% of autistic young girls actually meet the criteria for autism. If they had known that back when I was diagnosed as anorexic when I was 15, I could have had this understanding of myself decades ago. Because again, the repetitive restrictive behaviors, that is so lends itself to an eating disorder, to that kind of coping style. So yeah, I think my point was that even though we are a broad church, there are these commonalities that will tend to find oh yeah, I have special interests too. My special interests different than yours, but we have them. And I get, do you know what I mean?
My ritual, I guess, routine is my yoga every morning, right? And that is an adaptive thing that I've learned that emotionally regulates me. But if I'm not able to do it, one day or something happens and there's an unexpected disruption, then the fallout from that would be far greater and more detrimental than maybe, say, a non-autistic person who couldn't do their yoga in the morning. And I think a lot of us as well, especially women, we've learned to, I guess, make our routines of special interests a bit more palatable and a bit more accepting. So that they don't appear as, oh, this is definitely autistic. We've learned to tone it down a little bit. So we might say, oh, I love horses, or I do yoga, or I love this type of music. Things that are socially acceptable, but also quite repetitive and quite like routine oriented. It's still autistic, but I guess we've kind of softened it a bit to make sure that that is acceptable.
Mhm. And then for those that aren't acceptable, we end up hiding and masking it. So I've had some like really fucking bizarre special interests because again, I love this concept of monotropism, which is that we have this brain that thinks really, really deeply about things. So we go deep, we don't go broad. And for me, my monotropism can shift. And so I've had times where like my monotropism for like 2 years running was like biblical theology. And I had like it was ridiculous.
I wasn't expecting that.
I tell you, it's like so fucking random. So I'm going into like this whole history of like this huge religion and like the different translations and what do they mean. And like I went down this fucking rabbit hole. My brain just does that. And I just follow it because it's like that's where I'm like train tracks are leading me. And it's
Yes.
like, so what I was just saying with that is like that there are some that are socially acceptable, some that aren't, and some that are just people are like, like that's a bit train spotting of you. And they don't expect that, I think, of women in particular. And so we just end up hiding more and more of ourselves. And what I will say is that like when I'm working with autistic clients, special interests are so rejuvenating, so important to well-being. So whatever it is, no matter what weird thing it is, if it's bird watching or whatever, do more of that because it's going to give you life. When I'm like experiencing burnout and stuff, I know that spending some time with my special interests, with my nerdy books, like is going to make me feel a million times better, even if it's something that like other people think is weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And when people see us enjoying these special interests or routines, that's where the whole thing comes in about, oh, but are you actually struggling then if you enjoy these things? Are they actually disrupting your life? But if they're enjoyable for us, we've adapted to them and they work for us, I think it's fine. But I think people do still see being autistic as like you've been given a death sentence, right? And you shouldn't enjoy your life because you now have this label and it's a deficit and your whole life is a huge challenge. But there's a lot of autistic joy and a lot of hobbies and things that we enjoy. And it sounds like researchers and some clinicians want to take that away from us with these subtypes and with the diagnostic labels.
Autistic joy is such an important topic. Do I have it here? I've got my neurodiversity shelf there. Let me try and find it because it's beautiful and I want to give him a shout out. Yes, this one. Right. This book is What Do You Love Most About Life? It's by Chris Bonello, who's an autistic speaker and just a really sweet guy. I've met him at the Autism show in London a few times. And this profiles, like it's a beautiful book, profiles like autistic people, quite a lot of autistic children and what brings them joy. Answers from 150 autistic minds. It's so beautiful. An ode to autistic joy. I really recommend it. What do you love most about life? Shout out to Chris. And I experience bliss with really subtle things sometimes. Like for me, alone time is so rejuvenating. And I feel like back in the pre-autistic paradigm, I was told there was something wrong with me for liking that. Like, oh, you must be lonely. Or what's wrong with you? You don't have much friends or whatever. And so I was made to feel like this thing that actually gives me joy was something that made me wrong. And then I was depriving myself of it. And then I was getting deeper and deeper into the hole. Since coming to know that I'm autistic and I actually really thrive with I'm like a cat. I need a lot of alone time and I'll wander in when I want to and I'll wander out when I'm done.
Yeah.
Like just walking down the street. I love kind of being in a place where you can be anonymous. There's like people buzzing around. There's no pressure to interact. I've got my headphones on and I'm like, I've got a nice coffee in my hand and it is just bliss. That for me is I love going on dates by myself. My favorite part of being autistic is I get to date myself because I love being by myself. I take myself to the movies. I take myself for a walk in the park. I sit on my favorite sunny bench and read a book. I'm so happy.
I love that for us and lots of other autistic people, and we can do that. But we can only do that when we're accepted for it. And there is this thing that I sense that I'll go back to my point about we have this diagnostic label now, so you need to act like the autism trope. You have to um, lean on your challenges more and your deficits to prove that you have this diagnostic label. No joy for you. Don't enjoy your special interests. You were diagnosed with something very kind of tragic. And all of this narrative, I still see it here, but I think the neurodivergent community, lots of us, we're taking that back and leaning into autistic joy and talking about it a lot more and sharing our special interests and looking at ourselves through a strengths-based lens. But that's not to say that we don't have challenges, but also like we're humans and we deserve joy and enjoyment too in life. And we can have both. And it doesn't take away that we're not autistic anymore just because we like our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are still challenges. We get these moments of autistic joy, but because we live in a society that is built for a majority who's not autistic, we still rub up against that all the time. So it's like, let's rejuvenate ourselves while we can. I know that you did some research on this, that the concept of grief, like grief and relief, that resonates so much because like when I was diagnosed, I felt so relieved. And then I was like, oh, fuck, I'm never going to be normal. Fuck. Like I just thought, this is it. I'm doomed. Like, you know, it was a really weird mix of emotions. And I did have to grieve the idea, because with all my other labels and things, it was like, okay, well, you can heal from, you know, anxiety or whatever mental issue you've got. And this was like, oh, fuck, I can't heal from this. This is just me. And then there was part of me that was like, I'm broken. I'm going to be broken forever. And so I think that there is still a lot of stigma. So thanks, Uta Frith, for wanting to bring more of that.
Yay!
Yay, stigma.
That's the post-diagnostic support we need. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the grief, actually. And it is a lot because, yeah, we are faced with this can't change. This is actually permanent. I can't do a 6-week course on CBT and like alleviate symptoms. Like this is not only a diagnosis, but it's an identity. It is the core of our being. And I think a lot of psychologists and scientists go, oh, what do you mean it's an identity? It's a diagnosis. It's like anxiety and depression, but it really isn't. And I think there is research coming out that is approaching autism through an identity lens, my research being one of them. And I think that's where we need to go now. I think that's the territory we need to start exploring. And not to say that we can't conduct research on diagnostic biomarkers, if Frith wants that, but I think we need to, expand a bit more, I think, because there is such a lot of identity work that goes into it compared to, say, being diagnosed with depression, for example, or another thing.
It fundamentally changes your concept of who you are. And I think, I mean, I find it useful to think of neurodiversity or neurodivergence like as a cultural difference, because as autistic people, we have different cultural norms. I'm ADHD as well. I mean, I know ADHDers, we have a different way of vibing with each other. Like these are cultural norms. And I think of it similar to being Mexican. Like we have a certain way of being. And yes, I can mask and I'm filtering my like Spanglish into English that other people can understand and saying like being less dramatic than I would be if I was with like my Mexican family and all of that. So it's like these are cultural differences. Cultural differences are real. It doesn't, in the same way that like culture is socially constructed, you know, these things can also be, I'm not saying that autism is socially constructed, but I'm saying that, what am I saying? Help me, Sophie.
That there's a huge social element to being autistic, I think, because at the end of the day, we are out in the world. You're right. It's not socially constructed, but there is a social element of it and people are perceiving. And there's norms and customs we have to follow. We're not just autistic and isolated in our house. There's exposure to the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I remember where I was going with it as well. And it's that it is part of our identity in that, like, you can't say that, like I've been diagnosed as Mexican.
Yeah, that's it.
Or you have a little bit of, like, whatever your background is. And so for me, it is me. Like that is where I'm coming from. But you can't separate it in the same way that you can't separate other aspects of who you are. And nor would I want to. I want to understand it. And I want to, like, you know, be able to, I think understanding ourselves gives us the ability to make empowered choices. That's the whole premise of, like, therapy and coaching, right?
Yes, for sure. And it makes me, maybe I'm cynical, but I don't know. I think there are some people in society who maybe don't want autistic people to make empowered choices. And I will
Mm,
leave it there, unless you want to expand
mm.
it. But
I feel like I do want to go into a little bit this concept that somehow all the research on like late diagnosed people is detracting from the people who perhaps have more difficulties, being autistic, who are less likely to be able to integrate into society and to have more
Mhm.
challenges at school and, with work and all of that, maybe have less independence, more support needs, maybe non-speaking. It's like, it's not a zero-sum game. Helping some autistics doesn't mean that we can't also help those other ones and also recognize, I mean, I think it is important to state that there is an amount of privilege in being able to function, even if
Yeah.
that functioning comes at a cost. And so I've encountered pushback sometimes from parents of autistic children who are the type that Uta Frith would recognize were diagnosed early, and sometimes the parents themselves can seem skeptical of it because they have one experience of what autism is, and it's like, well, how can you be autistic? My child's like this and you're completely different. I think it is important that we don't like overshadow or forget to mention like our less visible autistic like comrades, right? because
Mhm.
because a lot of us late diagnosed people are quite loud because we have the privilege of being able to be loud, and not everyone can easily do a podcast, for example. Yeah. So there's a
Exactly.
privilege in being able to be in this position and being able to talk about being autistic that some
Exactly.
people don't have. It's like, how can we use our privilege to help the autistic community instead of like somehow invalidating that we don't belong to it? I mean, how is that going to help anyone?
I see where you're like coming from now. I think there isn't a lot of integration within the autistic community. For one, because we have an autism community and then we have an autistic community. And autistic community, I would say a lot of us who describe ourselves in that way are usually those who are late diagnosed or late identified or self-diagnosed in life. Maybe women or non-binary people, we're in this group, maybe see us as quite strengths-based, identity-focused. And then we have an autism group, which is typically made up of scientists and mothers or parents of autistic children. And maybe, I'm going to generalize hugely here, but parents of children who are maybe non-speaking or have a learning difficulty as well as autism. And I'm not seeing much integration between these two camps. And I think introducing a subtype or levels will probably distance us a lot further. And I'm not sure if you've picked up on this, but I definitely do see there being a bit of we don't really interact with each other together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really, I guess the barrier is like those of us who are autistic not interacting with those who have preconceptions about what being autistic means.
Mm.
And so, like, yeah, I do see that challenge. That's interesting. I hadn't considered it that way, that there's an autistic community and there's an autism community. And the autism community is those who are researchers or parents or advocates for the typical, but the thing is we already have the labels that we need. I think it's perfectly like stackable, right? So like basically you've got autism, and I'm not saying it's perfect at all,
No.
but you've got autism level 1, 2, and 3 depending on
Yes.
support needs, and
Yeah.
then there are learning differences, and then there's another like categorization for that, so they're already there. I'm not sure what else we need really.
Yeah. They are already there. And there is autism. And then you're right, there are the support need levels. And I'm not quite sure what Thrift is wanting more of. What does she want? I still don't know from reading the article what she actually wants.
So Uta Frith talks about the categorization of different types of people. And I think one of her challenges is that she claims that we have broadened the category so much, whereas it used to be two types, right? There was, according to her, this is her words, this is not what I said.
Mm.
So Uta Frith says there are those who are intellectually impaired and are diagnosed early and cannot be accommodated very easily in mainstream, and they tend to have very challenging behavior. So that's
Mm.
one type, according to Uta Frith. And then the other type is children who have been diagnosed as autistic but who have good language and might once have fitted into the Asperger's syndrome category.
Yeah.
Then she's claiming that now we have the extended spectrum of people who are hypersensitive and don't fit into either of those. But my understanding of the diagnosis now is that people who would have fitted into the Asperger syndrome category are now autism level 1. It
Yes.
has not expanded. If
Yes.
anything, it's maybe excluded some people who previously would have gotten a diagnosis. It's gotten narrower, not wider.
yeah, they've got rid of the Asperger syndrome label, but they haven't actually got rid of the criteria that sat with it. It's just merged into level 1.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think Uta Frith, because again, she's directing a lot of this criticism of like the muddying of the diagnosis and the research pool, but with this the autistic women and late diagnosed people who've joined. And so the idea, I think, according to Uta Frith, is that Asperger's is a very male thing. And so the typical male Asperger's is what should be considered Asperger's. And if you don't conform to that, then you shouldn't get that. And presumably should think we shouldn't get autism level 1 either. And so there's just so many stereotypes and generalizations. And it comes back to this idea that you can observe on the outside what someone's experience is. And you really can't. I mean, think about how many people, die by suicide. And people will say, I was just talking to them yesterday and they were really happy. You can't tell what's going on for someone inside.
You can't tell.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of this is like a fear of losing power, because if you used to be able to categorize people and what, like I used to be able to tell you what your experience is, and now you're telling me I can't do that? Am I out of a job? Yes, I think you are.
You hit something I really wanted to speak on. It's this kind of medical authority and research authority as well now. So that the power is going back to if some clinicians are doing this when they're doing diagnoses, accepting narrative accounts from autistic people, those of us late diagnosed. If we're then giving some of the diagnostic power back to the autistic person who is being diagnosed, what does that mean for the wider healthcare establishment, medical authority? Who has power now? And I hate to say it, a lot of it is to do with power. Sure, diagnosticians are helping autistic people and families, but there's an underlying undercurrent here of who has power now, who is the expert in the room. And I think we're seeing the tables turn now as autistic people are becoming self-advocates instead of relying on organization or family to advocate for us and speak for us. We are speaking with each other. And I think that scares a hell of a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting that shift. And I wonder if we're going to get to a place where diagnosis is not needed. I know that in some places in the community, there's a wider acceptance of self-diagnosis, but the idea of having to be diagnosed as an identity anyways, it's like, like no one diagnosed me as gay. Like I figured that out for myself. Imagine having to gatekeep other parts of your identity. Like, why are we doing this? But that's a whole other podcast, and we are going to be doing a part 2.
Like a diagnostic gaydar or something. Yeah, it goes back to this thing of it. There is an identity aspect here, and also there are people who are self-diagnosing or IDing because of the 8-year NHS wait list to get an assessment, and some people actually would refuse the actual diagnostic label, and they're quite happily self-identifying and they know what their needs are. And that's that, and they wouldn't actually want a model. And some people are not choosing because they can't actually access the assessments in the first place.
Yeah, that's it. So being able to be diagnosed is a privilege that not everyone has, and it's also something that not everyone wants. So there's, Dr. Devin Price, who's a quite prominent autistic researcher, who is not diagnosed and is not actually not pro-diagnosis, because it's this idea of why should you need diagnosis of your own experience. I just want to touch on the last bit, which is what Uta Frith was saying around, sensory adjustments. And she claims that sensory adjustments like ear defenders or turning down the lights have very little scientific grounding. And she says, as far as I know, there hasn't been any research into finding out whether these sensory adjustments actually improve lives. This piece is just for me so illustrative of the way her approach is, because these things make a massive difference to lives. They've made a huge difference to a lot of late diagnosed people who struggled and now no longer struggle because of sensory issues. Like for me, I know that if I go outside, I need to wear sunglasses, and then my nervous system's not going to be as overwhelmed. And I wear sunglasses even in the dead of winter. And I
Yes.
wear noise canceling headphones a lot. And actually, it's improved my mental health. So, what I don't get is like this kind of like selective dismissing of this stuff that is actually out there. There's reams of research showing that these sensory adjustments do improve lives. And so, here we have a group of people who's saying this diagnosis has helped me, understanding what I can do to support myself as someone with these needs has helped me. And she's saying, oh, I don't know if that's actually a valid need or if they just kind of want attention for wearing ear defenders.
Listen to the accounts again, the first person accounts, not the parents' accounts or clinicians' accounts, autistic people's accounts of what helps us. And she'll have her answer. And maybe the reason why there isn't such a lot of research on it is because research is slow, funding is non-existent. We have to also think about this as well. This is not a research priority for researchers to research this, unfortunately. There's a lot of people being preoccupied now with genetic factors and finding the cause still, and maybe research will come out later on, but I just think it's a bit of an overarching claim from her to say, well, it doesn't help. It helps a hell of a lot of us, and I don't really know what proof she actually wants from that.
I mean, the thing is, you can't, according to her measures, you can't measure it because if she's dismissing lived experience and all you have is lived experience proof,
Yeah.
how can you tell? That's what it comes down to. Do you trust people's experiences or do you want to be able to tell them what their experience is?
Yes. There's a lot of experiential research, self-reflective accounts, surveys, interviews with autistic people about our sensory experiences. But what I think she might be hinting at maybe is, well, there isn't a cause and effect, or there isn't absolute scientific proof that it helps. I don't know, neurological. Again, this is not my area, so I can't speak on it. But I think maybe this is the elephant in the room of her argument. Yes, it doesn't matter that there's experiential, scientific, empirical research out there on this. It doesn't matter. We need to find a cause and an effect for these things, a marker to say, definitely, it's an autism-related thing. And for some of this stuff, we can't ever get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as we finish unpacking this article, and I feel like I need to take a shower after this.
I need to do some yoga to regulate myself.
What would you like people to take away from this discussion?
I had to ponder the word scientific. It comes up a lot in this article, and to question what the meaning of science is and scientific research. There is a lot of research out here about the autistic experience, which is empirical and scientific and peer-reviewed, to look at those things and not get carried away by this distraction now that we have about biomarkers again and genetics and subtypes. And to also think about, again, she hasn't mentioned anything to do with post-diagnostic support, and this is a priority for us, all autistic people. And just to not get swept up in these debates and to go back to what is most important for autistic people and their families, post-diagnostic support, what is going to help us. Never mind what caused us to be this way or things that's happening in our brain rewiring. What can we do to help our daily lives?
Yeah. And on that point, I mean, thank you for all of the work that you do to support people in their post-diagnosis journey. You are amazing. So how can people find out more about your research, more about the work that you do, and how can they get in touch?
So yes, I am on LinkedIn as Sophie Longley. All my stuff is there. My research, it has such a long name, but if you Google it, it's Grilly. I am around on LinkedIn posting and talking about these things and straddling this really weird position I have between being an academic and being an autistic person.
It's been amazing to speak with you today. Thank you so much, Sophie. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.